Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled The Farmer and the Hog Farm. One of my neighbors is a farmer, and personally I think he is one of the best guys in the neighborhood. It is funny though, because he is the only farm with the areas all around him now being housing. He owns about 20 acres of land, and since it is only him, he was thinking of using some of his land to build housing and only keeping a few acres to run as the farm. This seemed reasonable, and he went to the city to find out what his options about it were. They found he could build lots roughly 2 acres in size, but he wanted to build housing that looked more like the streets next to his home. They were more densely packed, and he went to the city with that proposal. They accepted it, and honestly from there you would think this would be the end of a very short happy story. Unfortunately though, that was not the case, as some nosy neighbors needed to get involved. See, on the other side of his property the houses were more spread out, and they didn't want the farmer to build dense houses because it would look so different than theirs. The city told him that he needed to come to a resolution with the neighbors, because otherwise they could object to the construction and stop the whole process for months or even years. The farmer was friendly though, and went up to them trying to find a solution. He offered to build the larger spaced out houses on that side of his property for them, and the rest would be the dense housing that he wanted. It would cost him more money in the long run, but he wanted to just get a quick solution. They didn't like it though, and demanded that he do the entire property as large lots. Now, messing with a farmer tends to be a bad move no matter how nice they are, so with his housing plans ruined, he withdrew his application and came up with a better idea. He still did not want to use all of that land for crops anymore, so he was going to get some residents that did not need a housing plot. These came in the form of a large group of hogs that he adopted onto his farm. Now, some of you might be asking why they are considered hogs and not pigs. Well, as far as I can tell from looking at them, hogs are clearly much larger. And if you get too close, they also seem to be a tad bit smellier, but that might just be my imagination. As you can imagine though, the neighbors were not happy about this change from a bunch of nice houses potentially being built to their new neighbors being a bunch of hogs. They were so upset that they tried to go to the town and force the farmer to get rid of them. It was a farm though, and he had every right to turn it into an animal farm if he wished, and he decided to just go all the way with the hogs. I even asked him one day if it was expensive to get all of the hogs, and he said between the hogs themselves and the supplies it cost him a lot for an animal that, unlike cows or chickens, did not produce anything he could sell. He was really pleased with himself, and I got to be there when one of the neighbors stormed up to yell at him about it. "Neighbor, what the hell do you think you are trying to pull here? I tell you no to your ugly housing plan, and you decide to get a bunch of pigs?" Farmer: "Ma'am, I'm just respecting that you didn't want me building the houses there. Clearly people were going to miss the farmland being so close to them, so I decided to give the people what they wanted. You had a choice between human neighbors and hogs, and now you get the beauty of having hogs." Neighbor: "Listen, we can talk about the housing. What you said before about the large lots by us and then the rest being dense, I'm willing to talk more about that." Farmer: "No can do, ma'am. I already bought the hogs, and they call this farm home now. I cannot take it away from them to build housing now that the land is being used." The neighbor left angry and kept telling everyone that the farmer was stubborn and unwilling to negotiate anymore. They tried again to go to the city and claimed that he didn't have the kind of licenses to be keeping giant hogs on his farm. Turns out that he went one step further and got every type of permit that he might need to protect himself and the hogs to stay right where they are on the property. He even managed to get a permit stating that his farm was a protected wetland. I have no idea how he managed this, but apparently if they take him to court he will be able to get a lawyer. The cherry on top though is that all the kids from the neighborhood absolutely love the hogs and constantly want to go to the farm to see them. They are telling their parents that they want to be hog farmers when they grow up, and it is hard not to laugh at the looks on their faces when they realize that all of this could have been avoided if they just let the farmer build the houses like they wanted. Instead though, they are now forced to take their children to see the cute hogs and stand awkwardly right next to the farmer. Their last-ditch effort was to complain to the city about the smell coming from the farm. Hogs are not the best smelling creatures as you could imagine, and with certain wind, that smell does have the ability to travel into a few people's backyards on occasion. The farmer just explained though that this was the natural effect of having a farm in the neighborhood, and he could not stop the smell from traveling through the air. There was no way to contain smell, just like there wasn't any way to contain noise any person made in their yard. The city basically told them to stop complaining about the farmer, because his hogs were legal and there to stay as long as he wanted them. I hope they learned that messing with the farmer is a bad idea, because it will end with a hog farm being built in the middle of the neighborhood instead of some nice new houses that they wanted to begin with. Personally, I'm still good friends with this farmer and go to visit him for lunch fairly often. Also, it turned out that one of his hogs was pregnant and let me come and see it give birth and even name one of them. I named the little pig Anarchy because I really felt like it fit the situation. We call her N for short, and I visit her regularly. And yeah, ripe stars, time and time again we see in these stories what happens when you mess with a farmer. It is definitely something you don't want to do. Especially you should not even try that when you come from the city and feel entitled enough to try and dictate what a farmer does on his own property. Especially when he is doing something that is legal. Either way, if you enjoy the stories about farmers and neighbors, then please feel free to post some star emojis in the comments to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance for your amazing daily support. The next one is titled Epic Pro Revenge. I live in a consolidated county. That means that the city and county governments merged some years back, ostensibly to reduce administrative and infrastructure costs. This is important because services like fire, police, utilities and trash pickup are now managed by former county officials and not the city officials. Many of these services are also much more inefficient, and some services have been outsourced to private companies. My municipality outsourced trash and yard waste pickup a few years ago, and the two companies who now do those collections are woefully inadequate, and their services cost more than when the city or county did it. They both have similar sets of rules what can be put out for collection, take fewer types of waste away, and no longer come 2 days a week as the city once did, but now only come 1 day a week. We are all paying more money for less service. Now that the background is done, here is the story. I did some yard work over the course of a couple of weekends last summer, cutting some limbs, trimming some shrubbery, and cutting down a dead tree in my backyard. Knowing what the rules are for, how much yard waste, limbs, leaves and such can be put out, I bagged everything that was supposed to be bagged, filled up 3 of them. Things like leaves and small clippings, weeds and such, the paper bags for yard waste from the big box home improvement stores are what they require, so I used those. I just filled them halfway up so as to not make them too heavy for the waste collectors, even though there are no written weight restrictions. However, if a bag is too full, they will knock it over to spill out the contents so they don't have to pick it up. I cut the larger limbs down to under 4 feet in length, or they wouldn't be picked up. Anything at all they can do to get out of picking something up, they will do. And they almost always leave a horrendous mess behind when they do pick things up. The pile put out for collection is not allowed to be any wider than 10 feet, nor any deeper or higher than 5 feet, nor may it contain any piece longer than 4 feet. All bags must be placed in a row no more than 3 feet away from the limb pile. My pile was maybe 4 inches longer than the 10 feet, and only because of the tiny ends of the limbs, smaller than a toothpick, hanging out of the pile. The pile was no higher than 3 feet and no deeper than 4 feet, in other words, it fell within the size limits, except for a few twigs with leaves. I also had the 3 bags, each about half full of clippings and leaves, all lined up exactly as required and about 2 feet away from the main pile. They were scheduled to come on a Tuesday, but when I got home from work that afternoon, it was all still there. There was a pre-printed notice on my door that my pickup exceeded the prescribed size limits, and the note said that I would be required to either pay a $250 oversized load fee or reduce the size of the pile by half to make it fit into the limit. This is where the revenge comes in. I had the next 2 days off, so the next morning, bright and early, I got out the hedge trimmers. I trimmed the ends of the pile back to exactly 9 feet in length. After carefully laying those trimmed bits on top of the pile, I went to the backyard where the limbs I had not trimmed up the week before were stacked for the following week's pile and found 4 long, fairly straight limbs. I removed all the smaller limbs and leaves from these limbs, ending up with 4 moderately straight poles, each about 7 feet long. I marked 1-foot intervals on each pole in fluorescent orange paint and stuck them in the ground. Out at the curb in the front yard, at the corners of a rectangle exactly 5 feet wide and 10 feet long. Got out the surveyor's tape, which was bright pink plastic tape used to mark property corners, and tied it onto and around the stakes at the height of 5 feet. This established a visual outline of the volume I was required to stay within. I made absolutely sure that everything in the pile was completely inside the poles and below 5 feet in height. This required adding almost 2/3 of the remaining pile in the backyard to the stack out front, to then bring it up to 4 feet 6 inches in width, 4 feet 6 inches in depth, and 9 feet 6 inches in length. And also no pieces longer than 46 inches. The pile was almost twice as much material as before. This included some small logs up to 4 inches in diameter, also each 46 inches long. The limit is 5-inch diameter, all within the limits of 5 by 5 by 10 feet the waste company mandates. I carried each of the 3 bags of clippings to the backyard and filled each of them up as much as possible, while still being able to fold over the tops and staple shut each bag. I also included small 8-inch to 10-inch sections of the ends of larger limbs for added weight. The bags were now completely filled and weighed more than twice what they had before. I had to use the hand truck to get them out to the curb, they were so heavy. Oh, and all the extra clippings I had generated filled up 2 more bags, so the total was now 5 bags, the company limit. I then went inside, called the company, and very nicely asked that they come to pick up my yard waste, since they hadn't done so on Tuesday. They agreed to send out a truck and crew and told me that I would have to pay the fee. Come on then, I told them. They soon arrived and happened to be the same crew that normally comes to my neighborhood. I pulled a 25-foot Stanley tape measure from my pocket and asked them to measure the poles to confirm that the space was within the required limits. They did so and agreed the pile was not oversized and proceeded to spend the next 2 hours manually loading it all onto their truck. Oh, and it took both of them to manhandle each of those bags into the back of the truck too. I told them very nicely and with a smile that I knew what 10 feet was, pointed to the fence where it was marked with orange electrical tape, and thanked them for coming to pick up my yard waste. The 2 tired, sweaty waste disposal guys just groaned, got in their truck and drove off. There was no extra fee added to my bill for that month, never has been since. Now, I know they got paid for their time, and I know that I had to do a lot of extra work on my day off, but since last July, I have not once ever had them leave so much as a single leaf on the ground in front of my house. They actually had to do some hard work with me standing there in shorts, smiling and drinking cold Gatorade while they were sweating. And Ripe Stars, I'm curious, where you are from, how well are the garbage or waste disposal guys paid? Where I am from, a small European city, garbage disposal was not exactly a desirable job, and it probably still isn't. However, nowadays I heard it pays pretty well. And honestly, I got a ton of respect for people that work a job like this, because obviously, in the eyes of many, it's not a very prestigious job, but in my opinion, it is a job that just needs to be done, and I have a lot of respect for the people that do this. And the next one is titled How My Grandpa Got Paid to Own His Car. This is the perfect community for me to talk about my grandparents. I am incredibly proud and fond of everyone in my family, especially my grandparents. And even more especially, the most clever man I've ever met, my grandpa. Grandpa is my mom's dad from England, and the man is, honestly, I'm underselling this, a genius. This is just one of his stories. The story: so Grandpa is the village fix-it man and problem solver. If something is broken and needs to be mended, there is one person on the island you should call above everyone else, which is my grandpa. One day, while mending the umpteenth grandfather clock that has been dropped off at their house, my grandpa receives a call from one of the farms down the road. The gentleman who owns the farm was going to do some maintenance to a pond on his property, but unfortunately there is a slight speed bump in the form of a car that has been sitting in that pond for roughly 10 years. The land is somewhat mushy and swampy, and the owner of the farm is scratching his head how to get rid of it. So he called his old physics professor, my grandpa. Grandpa rents a tow truck, borrows a tractor, grabs some heavy-duty wood and a chain. He then promptly throws on some swim trunks, goggles, and hops in the pond. About half an hour later, the waterlogged car has been dredged out of the pond. So the farmer hands my grandpa 500 pounds for his trouble and sets about his day. Now, Grandpa has the car out of the pond, but what to do with it? Grandpa likes to tinker, and honestly, every project he has had in recent days has been somewhat of a trifle for him. So he gets a full-spec breakdown of the car somewhere and sets about entirely disassembling the engine, getting the water out, cleaning rust of what he can, replacing what cannot be salvaged. About 4 months later, he has reconstructed 50% of the car and repaired the other half. All electronics needed replacing, but there it is, a working car. He still owns that car to this day, and to this day it still smells like pond muck, but it works, and to this day Granny is still a little grumpy over having a waterlogged car in front of their house for so long. And Ripe Stars, as mentioned before, if you have any interesting stories to share about your own grandparents or stories from your grandparents, then please feel free to share them on r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, because I would be very happy to read these stories. And the next one is from r/Ripe Stories, our own subreddit, and it was posted by user HotDoctor689, and it is titled Dumb Boss from Hell, Dumb as a Box of Rocks. Call me Tim. My first job after getting an associate's degree in electronics came with a boss who thought anyone who attended college was an idiot. I'm well aware, however, an associate's degree is actually hardly a college degree. But it was free for me due to my military service, and he constantly made that point at every opportunity, pointing out how smart he was. His ability to train was non-existent, so I had trouble getting up to speed, but I managed. Let's call him Dofus. We serviced state-of-the-art fire suppression equipment used in the modern commercial computer systems at the time. They sometimes used a chemical dispersion of halon gas to put the fire out, and it was typically used on an on-site fire alarm that would automatically drop many thousands of dollars of this gas if a fire was detected. Something I never wanted to do by accident, but my associate's degree was in electronics, so the job was pretty easy. One day, there was a trouble call for a system on a large commercial building that was occupied by a national insurance company. I happened to be working in the city at this time. Luckily, there was no halon on this installation. Doofus paged me, I called him, and he told me to check out the problem. When I got there, the maintenance department said they had no electrical drawings for me to use. I called Doofus and he said, "I don't see any problems in the drawing. Just pull fuses A3, B3 and C3 and the building alarms will not ring." Yeah, no, that was wrong. The building alarms rang loud on my first test in a 12-story building with hundreds of people. Everyone must exit the building onto the street until all floors are searched for a fire. A fire code requirement, and as it turned out, an alarm notification also rang in the city fire department, resulting in a dozen fire trucks and 40 firemen screaming to the scene. The people in the insurance agency were very understanding, but when they asked how such a serious error could be made, I said having someone from a distant location telling you what they see on drawings is not a good idea. My boss tried to blame me apparently, but the customer knew that was unreasonable. Now, the malicious compliance, him and I had to go on an overnighter 100 miles from home. Our hotels and meals were covered on a company expense credit card held by Doofus Boy. He had invited a local college girl he was hot after to join us for dinner. Now, this idiot is married, has a 2-year-old son, and his wife is several months pregnant. But this smart college girl has his number. She brings with her 4 college friends and they all order full meals with drinks and desserts. All got doggy bags. The price tag is massive. They thank him, get up and leave with their doggy bag booty just before the bill is delivered to the table. Doofus was expecting a single $12 meal to potentially get in, and the bill topped out over $150. A big bill in the 70s. He sat for several minutes with a pale pallor and obvious brain farts ringing out loud. If he puts that charge on his company card, he is toast. I told him the truth, I only had $10. His only option, his own credit card, which his college-educated wife handled because it confused him. When his wife saw the bill, he completely screwed up a reasonable explanation and she figured out what he was doing. After that, his ex-wife, their children and a good divorce lawyer lightened his financial load and he never ate out at a restaurant again. His education cost quite a bit more than mine and mine could be used to actually earn money. I still laugh about this 40 years later. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.